Welcome to Flat Earth Debate Uncut and After Show. No, it's live. I'm your host, Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button if you'd like to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they are live, and there's also a PayPal, Patreon and crypto link in the info box below the video. Also below this video you can get £50 for swapping your UK electricity supplier to Octopus Energy, and this is a particular note if you drive an electric vehicle. Most importantly, if you'd like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the nature of Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcome back on the next stream. Please also share the show on social media. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel, so please share the show on Facebook and Twitter. One last time, if you're new to the channel or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. Now we are joined by Refracted Curvature, 10th Man, Neil, who did I miss? I don't think I missed anybody. And a whole bunch of people in Discord. Welcome, one and all.
Good morning. Good morning.
Hey, good morning.
I thought there was a fourth person. There's a presentation running, so it looked like there was a fourth person.
Oh, that's what it was.
I could have swore there was 4 people in the Hangout before I did the intro. Did somebody drop?
Neil did.
Oh, and then he came back. Okay, fine. I could just see it happening out the corner of my eye just to throw confusion in while I was starting my live intro. But there we go. Such is life, eh? Thanks, Neil.
Unintentional.
Good to have everyone here. Got Righteous Force, I think, in the... No, we haven't. Better hustle everyone off mute before I start asking housekeeping questions. I'll say a quick hello to Arwin. Hello, Arwin.
Hello, hello. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good show today. Kept it in the background the whole day.
Oh, you were listening?
Yeah, I was doing things.
I did see you in there.
Well, I normally come in and I'll introduce myself to let you know that I'm there listening, even though I might not necessarily be chatting away. But while I joined Arwin's show, and I typically will watch whoever I like. I'll watch their ads. If they're a monetized channel, I'll sit and I'll watch their ads, or at least half of their ads, just so they get the monetization or the revenue from it. Anyway, I'm sat there watching one of Arwin's ads, and I see this troll comment that I was like, oh, that's a bit below the belt. So I put the guy in timeout, and then eventually the ad ends. Arwin comes up and he's screaming at me, why are you timing people out? I'm having a conversation here. I'm like, oh, God. Well done. Sorry, my bad. Just force a habit.
Yeah, now you know what it's like.
Yeah, I know. That's essentially me, right, rumpusing the conversation that you're having with your chat. But like I said, I didn't know what was going on because I was watching your ads, to be fair.
That's all right. You weren't the only one, by the way.
I saw, after I did it, someone else did the exact same thing. I'm like, uh-oh. And I was like, I'm going to take wrenches away. I'm like, oh, God. Look, I'm apologising profusely and you're now doing the same thing. Bloody hell. Don't you people learn, mods of Arwin?
Right, but yeah, the rest of the show went great. Lots of conversations. And back and forth with ballers and their weird conceptions of how reality works.
Yeah, I was overloading and distorting my mic yesterday. So when I put my microphone away, what happens is I've got a long shotgun mic, and when I fold it up on the boom arm and then tuck it away, it sort of brushes past the preamp. And I think what I've done is, I think I've done this twice now, accidentally turned the volume right up on the preamp to the point where it's distorting. And I'm like, I've gone back to the show and I've gone, oh God, why am I so loud? And then it's just, I've looked at the preamp settings and gone, oh dear, I should really check that on a daily basis before I start. Oh well, I will from now on. So hopefully my audio is a lot better than it was yesterday. But there we go. Sod's Law, Murphy's Law. That was when a fundy comes in and has a discussion. Oh well, such is life. So, Discord, you did a couple of you have a chat before the live show began. Can I just get a few more hellos, though, just to see that you're all warmed up?
Hey, good afternoon.
Jorge, that's all we get. That's all you get in audience. That's it.
Loud partying going on there.
That's it. Other than one space, it's a full Discord server. I can't throw it up on screen for reasons I won't bore you with. Smash the PayPal link if you want to help me fix my projector. But yeah, there's loads of people in there. We'll try that once more, turning into a comp area. Everybody happy in Discord?
Definitely happy, man. Sorry at work.
Hey. That was Truth Be Told and Jorge again. Truth Seeker. There we go. Third person. That's good enough for me. Any evidence of a physical geometric sphere edge horizon, formerly known as the curve of the Earth?
Not since the Black Swan, no.
You're gonna need her for that.
Where would the curve be at in 10th's diagram there? I'm just not seeing a curve for the sextant. What are they talking about?
Obviously, if that straight line along the bottom was representative of a sphere Earth, it would have a curved line, and therefore the acquisition of an angle would be impossible. That doesn't represent a curved surface. You're looking at a right angle, a 90-degree right angle. That's two straight lines.
So Earth has to be flat for this thing to work then, huh?
Correct. In my opinion, and in Mitch's opinion, and in 10th Man's opinion, I don't know about Brian, but the certain aspects of this particular proof are held to constantly, daily, over on Bev's channel. Shout out to Bev Try Thinking. So this is, in my opinion, the best flat Earth proof there is.
But what about terrestrial refraction? Why are you ignoring it?
You'll need R for that. Any evidence of the R value, Earth radius?
If the Earth had a radius, this instrument wouldn't work.
That's correct. It also works as an equally good globe debunking, but in terms of whether or not I'd put it as a globe debunking, I'd say no, because you have to rest on the laurels of the Black Swan when it gets to the terrestrial refraction claim. You have to point out that they can't acquire a straight line to a tangent point in their sphere-Earth geometry after they beg the question when they've got this angle off a curved surface which they can't acquire. But to get into that argument, you've got to have a good grounding in the Black Swan to use this as a globe debunking, which it is. There's no two ways about it. This debunks the globe. But I think it's actually, first and foremost, a better flat Earth proof, because how it actually works, what it actually does is utilise a flat plane. So it's a flat Earth proof, first and foremost, in my humble opinion.
But it utilizes it visually, right? It's a visual instrument. So if terrestrial refraction bends it into the flat plane, well, then it definitely works on the globe, because you only need the visual to be flat.
Not working off that. When you do the measurement, it's purely geometric. So what 10th Man explained in the pre-show was exactly that. What you're doing when you do a dip correction, for example, well, what you're trying to do is get it to pure geometry. Well, pure flat geometry.
But isn't you have to dip correct for the visual, right? So because you could basically apply geodesics in that. You don't necessarily need to, but the end result has to be visually flat, and you have to attune to that visual flat result. That's what you have to adapt the dip correction for, right?
Yes.
No. Doesn't mean that it can geometrically be a ball.
Let Arwin work within the paradigm. Just let him go through his motions. Go ahead, Arwin.
Right. As long as it is visually flat, then the sextant works just fine, and the dip correction will be in relation to your height with the visual flat result, right? So if terrestrial refraction actually makes it from a geometric sphere into that flat plane, then it works just fine with the sextant.
There's where you go wrong. So it's the other way around. So if you're working from a apparently flat appearing horizon because of an R-based terrestrial refraction at a given rate, then what you're then doing is taking something that is devoid of geometry once you take it into the real world. So you're saying, okay, refracted means not straight. So we're going to take this not straight line to be our straight line because it appears straight. Well, no, you're not doing anything with apparently straight lines. The geometry uses straight lines.
No, but the geometry proceedings are basically mechanical. They're mathematical.
Correct.
When it's all based on the visuals. So if the visuals just are straight, then that works out mathematically.
No, it does. Other
but
than the fact,
geometrically, it doesn't have to be flat.
No, it does, because what you're doing is you're taking it from a curved position. So you're saying, well, geometrically, it seems and looks flat. But what I'm doing to get to that point is applying refraction. So you're taking it away from the geometry to say that I can get it to be geometrically flat. So applying refraction from a sphere that requires an R value you don't have, I've said that 3 times, would mean that you're saying, no, I'm going to go away from the pure geometry to line up with my sphere belief in the first instance to give me an apparent flat line so I can then do pure flat geometry. That doesn't work. You're moving away from the sphere geometry to refracted geometry, which isn't straight lines, to say that you've got a straight line. That doesn't work, Arwen, I'm sorry.
I don't have any objections to the way you described it. That works perfectly. So
no, that's bendizontal. You're describing bendizontal.
Yes. Mechanical geometry sphere becomes visually flat. Then you apply mathematics to that visual flat, and then it works out.
Yeah, so what you're saying is something that you have as a presupposed curved surface, then bent back into an apparently flat surface by way of a utilization of an R value derived from a geometric horizon you can no longer acquire to make this argument, would mean that you've got an apparently flat surface to then transpose that into flat geometry that actually uses straight lines. No, this does not work. You trying to take 1, 2, 3 steps to go from geometry of a sphere to refracted geometry of a sphere, to apparent geometry that you're seeing through a sextant, to straight line that's actually going to give you an angle. Is that 3 or 4 steps? Either way, this isn't going to work. You're never going to shoehorn curved surfaces into straight lines. The two are not the same thing, and when you try, all you're doing is something that's now been summarised by Bev for at least a year, probably a couple of years now. That is bendizontal.
Right, but bendizontal is just a natural hazard of terrestrial refraction, right? So other than we not having the R value, an origin of it, which is very frustrating, right?
I sensed you would.
I don't see any objection.
I sensed
Other
you would
than
pepper
not
it.
having R, I don't see any objection. Sorry.
Yeah, he's now rumpusing that disclaimer. So yeah, I laughed because I thought you would actually drop in the disclaimer that you haven't got R, and you did immediately. It's amazing how well I know Arwen now, because that could have gone either way. I could have got really angry with him, knowing that he was going to rumpus his way through, but he rumpused with the disclaimer, which is even better, Arwen. Kudos. Yeah, you need R for that, right?
Why is sea level so important for the sextant?
Level. Flat baseline.
Thank you. Yeah.
Because it perfectly conforms to the sphere geometry because of...
No, because you need a right angle. No, because you need a right angle from the GP of the star you're sighting to you. And this is in every book that I've seen about celestial navigation. And these are all baller books.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair to Arwen, he has done this on the R value question. You know, this is very pertinent, and he's brought it back to the point. You know, you can't really fault him.
Yeah, but the R value is assumed.
Oh.
It's assumed because of the center of the Earth is where they're saying that the vertex is. And yet they're on the surface of a curved sphere, that the sextant is inoperable. It can't work on a curved surface. So that's why they have to do dip. They have to bring it to sea level so it can work, because the Earth is flat.
Somebody want to add something from Discord? I had some mumblings or murmurings. Go ahead, Jorge, if that was you.
It wasn't me, but I would like to mention they also are begging the question of what's bending, gravity, center of mass. That's the only excuse they have for the water not to be level.
Absolutely, but yeah, the center of that mass is R.
If water was
level.
If water
With R, it is level.
Well done.
If water was
excuse me, don't rumpus the nonsense from Arwen. Go ahead, Arwen.
Yeah, I just want to say, no, level with R is a sphere. That's the whole point.
Yes, that's not level. Spheres aren't level.
They are on the sphere.
No, they're not. No point ever. What are you talking about? It's never level at any stage ever.
But why does it look so flat then? Right? Terrestrial refraction makes it look flat. Well, that works out perfectly.
No, we've just done all this. Yeah, Bendy's on till yes. We've just done all this. Did you want to drag this out a bit more? Have you found some fun in this recently, Arwin? What's going on?
No, this is all spontaneous. If you want to move on, that's fine.
No, it's fine. I thought you were going to plug Bev's channel. This geometry is something that Bev has barked on about for ages. Yeah? And he's got an exemplary understanding of it. And he just tracks ballers around by the short hairs with it all day long, laughing at them. Check out Bev's channel. It's good fun.
Well, you recall, I think Adam's trying to get in, so I'll let him go first.
Go
No,
ahead.
it was just to say, no, it's not. It's not level. It's equidistant on a ball. It's very different to horizontal or level. But Baldwin's stopped now, so.
Yeah. The guest yesterday, Tommy, whatever he goes by, asked him a question on Friday to see where he was. Can he distinguish between curved and straight? And we found out how that's impossible if you're a baller. They have to deny geometry to have this assumed ball that they live on, because nothing in reality proves what they're saying. When ships, if you read any of the older books that were flat earth related books, say in the 1800s, that was the Nathan Oakley of that day. They were just pounding the ballers with logic and just obvious things. And one of them was just really saying, these people know that the water finds its level. And yet, because they want to push the globe model, they have to say some crazy things. So when they see optically the bottom of ships disappearing at a distance, and that can be this distance one day, another distance another day due to weather and everything else that we know. Because they already assume a ball, they're going to say, oh, that's because it's a ball and it's going over the curve and the horizon is Earth curve. Well, today we have a much different argument because they're denying the horizon is Earth curve. We're finding out it's perspective, just like they knew in the 1800s. And because they already knew water finds its level, rather than stick to something that is verifiable, they decided to throw the verifiable into the heap of trash and go with their assumed position that the horizon was Earth curve. Well, the black swan comes, destroys everything. The sextant destroys everything. They have absolutely nothing. It's all an assumption.
Well, if you have a geometric claim, like say about the Earth being a sphere, why would you deny geometry at that point? That would kind of destroy your position, wouldn't it?
Yeah, same reason they deny axial rotation when they say there's no drift to observe, or why would we expect to see drift? Yes, it fundamentally undermines their own position. Likewise, you can lead certain ballers to fundamentally undermine their own position with their quotes. For example, nobody claims the horizon is Earth curve. Nobody's claiming we will see physical geometry. Nobody's expecting to see the geometric horizon. The geometric horizon only exists in the maths. All of these statements fundamentally undermine the premise that we will see Earth curve.
It doesn't vet out in reality. It's only in the assumption.
Only in the maths.
But it's not, yeah, it's in the maths, but the maths don't vet out in reality. They know water doesn't stick to outside of a ball. They know this. And yet they're saying the ships are disappearing because they're on the ball.
Hey, Chocolate. Sorry, 10th. I thought you'd done. Sorry.
No, I'm done. Do you want me to keep the screen up, or are we done, or do you want me to go over it again? It's up to you.
No, I'm happy if you want to turn it off for now.
Okay.
Hey, Chocolate.
Guys.
Are you chocolate?
Yo, Choco.
How's everybody?
Good. Just making our way through a few housekeeping questions. Any evidence of the distance to the sun?
What is it?
Black Swan.
Black Swan?
Black Swan?
Black Swan, George? Oh, hey, what are you talking about?
Yeah, Black Swan. Yeah, debunk the radius of the Earth. No distance to the sun.
Oh, I see what you mean. They need R for their distance. Sorry. Okay. Yes, you'll need R for that if you're claiming 93 million miles. Black Swan. Yeah, I see.
You need a Venus R.
And it needs to be exactly the same size.
Right, it's the same radius.
Otherwise, you've only got proportionality. So you have
Don't deny Venus has the same radius as Earth. How dare you?
What Adam's talking about is Kepler's third law, right? Where you've only got the mathematics to scale things, and you can put them at whatever distance you like. To fix the distance, you need the size of something in the sky. So in the same way we say, no, we're not going to be utilising this triangulation method to give us the size or distance to the luminaries. It's not possible unless you've got one or the other. The actual size would be very useful. Well, in this instance, Christian Huygens made a big assumption, and that would be to say that he assumed we have a twin. Ever hear of Earth's twin? That would be Venus. Why is it called Earth's twin? Well, because Christian Huygens made a leap of logic, an assumption that it had the same R value, the same value we've debunked, as Earth. So Venus is just the same size to give you a scale value. Did you want to expand on that a bit, Adam? Because it's not often we cover this, and you're here and much more knowledgeable on this than I am, because it's maths.
Well, no, you have done it. If all we have is proportionalities and relationships between things in the sky, you can. Joan does it best. You know, you can stick any numbers in there, and it's correct in terms of matching up to the data you've got. But to be able to draw any real inferences to ascribe distances to anything between any of the luminaries, you've got to have something that you can measure. Nobody's claimed that Venus was measured, and this is the laughable part, isn't it? That we needed something to measure to formulate this, and such a weird assumption to me was made. How and why it was justified, I still don't know. I don't think there's anything that validates why he made that assumption. But in doing so, that then allows you to scale it. They're not Darwinian units. I suppose they're stated from Discord. It's fundamentally amounts of R that you're measuring, isn't it? And that's what you're building your scale upon. The assumption that Venus's R is the same as the Earth's R, and the assumption that you've got Earth's R. And then all you're doing is they're the lines on your ruler, aren't they? Number of R's, really.
Correct. And assuming that Earth's a sphere and you've got an R value to acquire in the first instance, you can then transpose that onto something that gives you the scaling values for the interplanetary motion in a heliocentric model, a la Kepler. Well, wonderful. That requires several assumptions, that one of which we've debunked. Any evidence of a molten iron core at the centre of a presupposed spherical Earth?
I was just about to work out the number of R's to the sun. 23,490 R's, 0.78 to the sun.
Can you convert that into fictional light distances, please?
So if I multiply that number of R's by R, it comes to 93 million miles. But that'd be 23,490.78 R's to the sun. All three Darwinian units. Doesn't matter which.
Ain't maths great?
Well, yes. Although Riley keeps trolling me in chats and stuff, trying to claim it's a load of bunkum. But
You what? Say that again.
Riley was trolling me. I was saying I love maths yesterday and Mitchell stuff, and he was saying maths is nonsense. It's not reality, he's saying.
That's like saying, well, hold on. That's like saying English is just nonsense. Chinese, well, a load of nonsense. That's what it's like saying.
Right.
There you go. Look, maths is like toothache. Look, see, you troll, clear off. Someone take his spanner off him. Let me time him out.
Hold on, what's he saying? Just let's. I haven't got enough screen space to see what's going on in the chat. This is so frustrating. Hold on, let's move
Maths
some tabs
is
around.
like toothache. Yeah.
It's just a language. That's all it is. Can you use language to accurately describe and represent your car when you put it on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist? Can you be concise and accurate in your linguistic description of your car? Anybody? Just need a yes.
Yeah.
Can you also, with the exact same language, be a deceitful lying shit about your car on Craigslist and Facebook?
You can misdescribe things as well. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Can you misdescribe your car on your advert using language? You just need a yes. God, this is like
Yes.
pulling teeth.
Yeah.
Right, the same is said for maths in exactly the same way.
The trouble with maths, when we're applying it to as a description of reality, and it's not just like pure maths in of itself, is very rarely does it ever describe it properly. It's probably the worst advert placer ever when it's trying to describe reality, because we tend to take little bits to keep it simple. So very rarely does maths describe the entirety of reality. We tend to take maths and describe very little discrete sections of it, because reality is very complex and maths is very specific to little things.
Well, yeah, that too. And
Go on.
like phlogiston. Yeah, I was going to say like phlogiston, where you're working with a concept that doesn't exist. You may have an accurate prediction with phlogiston using a mathematical formula. It doesn't mean that phlogiston exists. It doesn't mean that you're right in your description, you know?
It doesn't mean that your description has the conventions at its utilization of whatever aspect of that maths. So, okay, you could describe it in binary, you could describe it in hexadecimal. Which one's more accurate?
For describing phlogiston?
Yeah. Something that doesn't
Oh, they all
exist.
work great.
This is my point. This is my point. When you're describing something that doesn't exist, like for phlogiston, which is, again, you could give it as a verbal description, but mathematically qualifying it and me saying, well, which is the more accurate mathematical description to give it, hex or decimal, was the two I used, whatever. Either way, whatever mathematical language and convention you're using, and then you spend all day arguing about whether or not it's better to define it in binary rather than hexadecimal, and you go, we're defining something mathematically and arguing about the whys and wherefores of how it's being described and with which conventions. The thing doesn't exist!
Yeah, well, that ruins it, doesn't it? But
Yep.
Didn't stop us spending all day arguing about how we should clarify the description, though.
no, but let me defend this and just bring it to what Riley. The point we were kind of making there is that we covered it on Ball Busters, Nathan, with the ballers attacking Mitchell, with them proving R. And as I was saying, I love maths because, and Riley said maths don't prove anything. And I said it does. Maths proves that the ballers don't understand maths. And that's why I love maths, because they're bringing this to the table thinking they're Billy Big Balls, yeah? And it's so full of holes because they're not describing reality. They're just taking a little bit of the maths and assuming everything so that their numbers work. But with just a small amount of analysis, you can see exactly what we've been describing there, that their description doesn't describe the reality they're taking readings from. It describes it how they want it to be, and they're also ignoring other bits and not including that in their maths because it's inconvenient and ruins the numbers. So that was the kind of the point. Maths is good, and you can use it for things, but it also, you can use it to demonstrate that other people aren't being honest with their maths. what's this? Maths, not maths. We are not able to call it maths as mathematics is useful in real life. Their version of maths, as it does anything they want it to. Yeah, exactly, Tony. That's kind of my point. They're using it so that the numbers match, but the description, mathematical description, isn't describing what's going off. And I think we highlighted that one with their global positioning, a geostationary satellite. Yeah, they tried to describe it one way so that all the angle was attributable to Earth curve. Yeah, but they forgot about the other part of reality in terms of the effect of distance on an object that's real. So their description was incorrect. And so when an incorrect description, but it matched up to give them an R within 2%. But then, as Mitchell shows yesterday, but if you actually just improve your maths a little bit and take into account a little bit more of reality with your maths, then it demonstrates that all your assumptions are now bunkum, or your R has gone to 8,000 kilometers. But I find it useful in that way. We kind of caught that on Saturday as well, didn't we, Watts?
Right. There's two things with that. Go on, you go first.
I was going to say, if we take all the assumptions that Kepler made as true, except for the radius, the only derived radius we can get is our eyeball. So how many radii did you say it was from us to the sun?
That's oversimplifying it.
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
It's not just the radius. If you're talking about the diameter over the wavelength or whatever it is, lambda, then you're talking about the Rayleigh criterion giving you a distance, but then you're talking about apparent distance, i.e. your perception of what you can see of things and what you think it is in terms of the distance, which is almost irrelevant though, isn't it?
Yeah, that's completely subjective. You'll never get an objective distance.
Indeed. So the couple of things I was going to cover, one I've probably forgotten already, but they can't get an angle. So all of their assumptions about angles working from a presupposed spherical Earth to compare the difference in angle from their measurements to a geostationary or geosynchronous, I forget which word they used, satellite that they haven't taken into account is much, much closer than the infinite distances that they've got to their stars when they normally beg the question of an R-value measurement rather than the one they're holding. The one that they're holding requires a straight flat surface to acquire the angle in the first place, something that they couldn't acquire. So they couldn't make this comparison if the surface they were making the angle measurement to compare was curved. They couldn't get the angle in the first place. So this is flawed from the outset, begging the question, utilising a sphere value that they haven't got to confirm that they've already got it within 2%, missing, like you say, several aspects of the maths. That was the second point. They're conditioned to do that. So when you said, they didn't take into account the fact that it's not now an infinitely distant star that you're going to assume, you're talking about something that you've got a given distance that you can calculate for, which you did for them very kindly, I might add, Adam. And now, when you do that, why would it be that Adam immediately goes, well, there are varying distances to this item in the sky now, which is much closer. Why haven't they taken it into that account? Well, because their typical geometric sphere edge mathematics in Muppet Vision, which is exactly how this was presented, never accounts for perspective. The perspective account has been given and ascribed to the 1.2 times the square root of the observer's height to give you your horizon on a sphere. So that's where you've got your values from. It's a hijacking of perspective. So it's not a shock that they haven't taken that into consideration when they've done their Muppet Vision calculations on a sphere and just ignored the fact that, well, one of them's closer to it than the other. Closer to what? Well, their assumption of an orbiting satellite in a sky vacuum.
Yeah, it's how do you get R? Well, to compare it so that you know it's at 2%. Because we'd love to see that technique, the one that verifies R, so that you can go and do yours and know that you're within 2% of the right value. That I find is the ironic thing, that they boast that they're within 2% of it.
But they clearly know from the rebuttals that they've received to date what they need to disclaim. And it's like, I question, I don't know who the guy is, Wally or something, but when the video, which was suggested I watch by 10th Man, I went and watched it on Mitchell from Australia's channel. Shout out to Mitchell from Australia, subscribe today. When I watched it, I was like, he immediately disclaims that he has to assume the spherical surface beneath his feet before he starts any of the example. Now, he disclaimed that. So it's like, so at a base level, you understand that this is fallacious from the outset then. Because that's a fallacy to assume the outcome of the thing you're trying to prove. That's begging the question. But he's disclaiming it like, if I just make it really plain that I'm begging the question, yeah, I'm assuming a sphere, here it is, this big blue ball that I'm saying I'm getting within 2% of. Well, I've already got the blue ball, and I've already got a value to try and get within 2% of, and here's how I get to within 2% of the assumption I've already got in place when I make my claim. You're like, this is completely flawed and fallacious from the outset. But you think disclaiming it will get around that? Crazy, crazy idiot.
Yeah, but remember, we have been told the logical fallacy is better than nothing. So there's that.
Yeah, when he said that, did he realize that a logical fallacy voids your argument, so it's like nothing? Is that really the best he had?
Yeah, that's what he's disclaiming. He understands that we've debunked the R value and that it's not tolerated to beg the question. Obviously, in any other debate arena, assuming one's outcome would be immediately pummeled by a moderator just would not be tolerated. You can't start with a flaw in your logic and assume your outcome. Now, if it gets past, don't get me wrong, there's going to be weak moderators that allow this to happen all day. We see it in Flat Earth debates on other channels, I might add. But that's a fallacious start to your argument. You're trying to prove unicorns real. I say, right, okay, given that unicorns real, and here's my unicorn biology book, you can see that in the unicorn, given that it digests in this fashion, that would mean that, unicorns are real. You go, but you've started with the assumption that we've got unicorns, and you're taking me to a book that assumes unicorns are real to prove that unicorns are real. Yeah, but here's the mathematical quantities of the digestive tract. Look, I can calculate it all really accurately. You go, but you're assuming the premise that unicorns are real in the first place. Yeah, I've disclaimed that. Given that I assume unicorns are real to make my argument that unicorns are real because of this maths.
And I think they think when they put it like that they're being very reasonable, and we should just accept it and move forward from that. Seems to be the presentation now. It's a bit like Orwin does it when he did it to you earlier. He just dropped it in first, and they just do that and then want to move forward. And it's bloody cheek of it, isn't it? Really, is because you move forward, wasting your time.
Well, it's a debating tactic that Rumpus used to use, because the trick was to spot that disclaimer coming almost immediately the moment he opened his mouth. So once you catch the disclaimer, that's the point that you have to shut down the conversation, because no, we're not going to continue with a premise where we assume a sphere beneath our feet for you to make this example. That's begging the question. We're not going to move forward. Now, that would be what I said over the top of him. I'd be interrupting him, and he'd cry foul. Well, you're interrupting me, you're not allowing me make my argument. No, your argument's starting with the premise that you're trying to prove. You've already disclaimed that this is already true before you've even made any example. So I've got to accept that it's true before you move forward. No, I'm not going to do that. But of course, because you're interrupting them immediately, they can cry foul. And if you don't, you get a half-hour lecture with the assumption of the thing that's trying to be proven from the very outset for both parties, because you haven't spotted the fallacious reasoning that is begging the question.
I think they got comfortable because they used to throw that, well, everyone knows we're on a sphere. They got very comfortable with that.
Yeah, I've got old debates where it was stated overtly. Given that we already know we're on a sphere, would be the first thing disclaimed.
Well, prior to the Black Swan, it was claimed that it was measured using geometric principles.
The way this fallacy to introduce something that has no measurement is introduced typically is by way of something called a false dichotomy fallacy. So what you will see is two opposing models. Now, we don't live on a model. One of the model has an assumption of an R value. Now, rather than saying, I'm going to assume that Earth is a sphere, they say, we'll take your model of a flat plane and compare it to my model of a sphere, and we'll see which one wins. That's a false dichotomy fallacy. We don't live on either. We're not on a model. That's a reification fallacy. But in order to allow them to beg the question and seem like they're being reasonable, they'll hold up a straw man model that you may not even necessarily have ever seen. But apparently, because you now appreciate that the world is obviously observably, measurably and navigatably flat, you suddenly ascribe to this model they're holding up. in false dichotomy, so that they can beg the question of their R-based model.
That was the trick. I've done it before myself.
So how does this work on your model would be the first question you're asked as a flat earther. And you go,
well,
go on.
I was going to say it's best if you could catch the flat earther in a claim. Like usually the sun would do it, somebody saying it's a projection or something like that, because then you can engage once you get the flat earther to make a claim.
Correct. Exactly correct. And that's why I took interest in the DITRH/RV truth debate, or calling out as a shill as it actually took place. But either way, what caught my attention was exactly that. So I've said this before, so there's no surprises here, and there's no love lost between me and these parties. But if I just take a couple of examples, Mark Sargent and DITRH, they get it in the ear from me a reasonable amount about their use of models. For obvious reasons, if you watch the show. Now, they'll be listening to this going, yeah, what of it? Well, this is why. When it comes to the claim of the moon being a projection, it's a claim you are making that you then have to defend. Now, in the case of the RV Truth DITRH situation, it was slightly different on account of the fact that Dave has actually aligned with the position that is in line with a biblical belief, which is what RV holds. Therefore, when he changes his position, that seems characteristically bad as far as RV is concerned. He's then gone digging and found Dave looking Masonic on the bottom rung of a ladder, stood backwards holding a corona, some spirals, and a few other things that we won't go through. But the point is that aspect of it is where I say, well, actually, in this case, as much as I like RV, I actually totally agree with Dave in this instance. Sorry if you're listening, RV. He just gave me a shout out. What a shit sandwich for him. A slap in the face. I hope this doesn't seem like. But I actually completely agree with Dave. Now, I'm not decrying anybody their belief. If somebody wants to believe we're in a dome and there's sun and moon in the firmament, then that's entirely their prerogative to have that belief and their faith, and they can base it on and justify it with their biblical texts. People do it all day long. But then you've got to defend that. That becomes a claim. Well, okay, you're saying the sun is this thing in this dome. Prove it to me. And that is basically where you are then up against the ropes and having to defend your position that you've just claimed, rather than annihilating the position that we have as the Western worldview. That would be to say that it's a 93 million mile distance based on an R-value heliocentric model with a sky vacuum and a second law of thermodynamics violation, sun gas burning in a vacuum, not expanding to fill it. So it is much more convenient for me to say, why make this claim? It doesn't serve you any benefit to make it. Now, the justification, I'll just give that as well, just to be a bit more even, as I've given RV side, from both Mark and from Dearth, is in terms of their want and desire to offer teaching tools that rewire people's cognition. So, when I sat across the table at one of the conventions with Mark, this is how he explained it to me. If you are on a sphere and you have grown up with that notion, and it is the only conceptual way of viewing the world, then most people operate on a visual standpoint. They understand things when they see them and then can conceptualize them mentally afterwards. So showing somebody an azimuthal equidistant projection, or in the case of the sun, moon and zodiac clock app, the dome with a sun and moon inside it, showing how it tracks in terms with the time, a la the Gleason's map. So those tools are useful to potentially click somebody out of a paradigm. Now, it won't make any difference if I say to them, yeah, but these tools have been given to you by a system that wants you to have certain tools at your disposal because they've got blunt ends on them. Now, their argument would be plenty of people, and they're right, have snapped out of their globe cognition as a direct result of being able to visually present the world to their own mind by seeing this. And when that's been explained to me, I've had to take a step back and go, you've done a lot more for bringing people to this subject, and personally I don't even care if I do. So in many ways, why am I even arguing, other than my want and desire for both DITRH and Mark to have less combative arguments that aren't necessarily serving their ends to the best of their abilities. And in terms of making claims that you've got to back up, that, as John has just pointed out, is the thing that an anti-flat earther / glober will immediately focus on and get you to talk about that so they can pull apart your understanding of your claim that you've got no evidence to back beyond your biblical standpoint. So at that stage, you're no longer debunking the sky vacuum or the distance to the sun. You're justifying your belief in where the sun and moon as luminaries under a dome sit. Now, that might very well be the case. And I'd love to have some flat earthers actually come into the discussion and debate and start putting some of these positions to us so we can scrutinise them. We all know the earth's flat. We're all on the same side. I'll definitely be a lot nicer to you than a globe fundy believer because, for the most part, although people are people don't tend to chant 22 times that science can be changed after the fact, or not concede, as the case may be yesterday. Unreasonable behaviour tends to be less prevalent in the flat earth community than it does in the globe community. So when it comes to discussions about incoherent dielectric acceleration, downward biases, any of that sort of stuff, I would like to actually thrash it out in discussion here, because these are still things that people really desire, and I'm almost trying to suppress them, saying, no, well, why bother? It's only a tiny subsection of society that are interested in these things. And Neil's opinion is, well, that's where it all begins. You should address them and nip them in the bud. While I disagreed, I'm now saying, well, this is still a debate about the nature of reality. All welcome. If you want to argue that we've got a downward bias, yeah, join the show. Chances are you'll be, in my opinion, more reasonable than your average opponent here. So therefore, the discussion may be more fruitful, and we may actually learn something from these people who are dedicating their lives in some instances to progressing their understanding of a world that they've been deceived about. To be applauded. So, hopefully we'll get some new juicy information come our way, in the same way as 10th makes his presentations. Hopefully other people will come along and say, I would like you to listen to 10, 15 minutes of me telling you how I believe there is a downward bias, and you idiots don't understand when you use gas as an example of how things move in all directions, that actually we do have a downward bias. Here's how. I'd love to have that discussion. I don't know about you guys on the panel.
No, I look forward to learning new things. You know what I mean? So if anybody's got some learning to bring, then I want to learn it. Do you know what I mean? If there's something profound out there, something that we can take something from, we've not seen before, a way of viewing something, then that's kind of what we're here for, isn't it?
Right. I mean, I remember the magic of no trees, Adam. You were there when I was there, doing the exact same thing. And at the start of it, you're like, this could be something. Let's have a look at it. Now, most people jumped onto the bandwagon going, this is something, which I was like, hold on, let's just do a bit of research first, before we all jump onto this bandwagon. But it was still like, this might be something. This might actually expand my understanding of the history of the world that I'm actually stood on. And that's exciting, right? It's a possibility. Admittedly, with high degrees of scepticism from my position. I don't know about you, Adam. I can't remember how you took it at the time.
Both ways, in a way. It's this high. You if you go into it, you're gonna come out with no proof. You're gonna come out with a theory. It could be. Wouldn't that be amazing? But the other thing is, if you go into it properly, you do see the lack of plausibility of their explanations for it. It's based on a ball. It's based on molten lava-y thing doing strange things, forming very odd formations that don't really make sense either. So, to be honest, it's one of those things where I came out of it knowing less than when I went in, but having gotten rid of defunct false information, really, with regards to ball geology. Having had that as my previous understanding, that this is crystalline lattice rock that forms through freaky ways. So, yeah, I looked. Did I come out with it being a big tree? No. But again, I came out with more wonder of the world when I look at it.
Exactly. That's the thing I'm trying to get across, that, I don't want to discourage people who are looking into these avenues, because we'll pull them apart after the fact and say, well, what you're now claiming off the back of this interesting folly is complete nonsense. And the same can be said for many other subjects that I got into in exactly the same way. The first one, so after looking at psychopathy and subliminal messaging, I then stumbled across the Mandela effect. So in between there was flat Earth, but if we ignore that, Mandela effect came along. I'm like, oh yeah, let's have a look at this. Dug into it as much as I could dig into it with my stomach. Not let's not be too derogatory. There might be some Mandela believers that come along and preach this. But you know, that idea, in some ways, I actually agree with. And the only person I can find out there, God bless her, that aligns with me almost 100% in terms of what I think Mandela is Paula. So Bible Literalist has done several streams on the Mandela effect and what it is. In other words, I'm not saying there isn't anything, there's nothing in it. There is, but most definitely it's standard practice in media. You know, when we talk about the Mandela effect, this illusion of things changing because of bad memory, as opposed to actual overt changes that happened in the media a la 1984. You know, we're at war with Eurasia. No, we're at war with Oceania. Weren't we at war with... No, we weren't. You know, that actually happens and you can see it and show it. You know, change of story suddenly. Oh, well, that's a bit of a change of tune. And when it's done by politicians, they just describe it as a U-turn, right? Well, you know, standard media practice to change a narrative mid-flow. Completely change the story. So, yeah, or have the story disappear completely, just vanish out of all existence. Yeah, that also happens, the memory hole, right? But that is something that you can really easily see and qualify. And most people, even normies, will understand it. But that's been spun out of all effect into crazy stuff happening in movies where, you know, certain details that you didn't notice and have become more obvious since the onset of high-definition imagery, rather than massive screens that you'd originally seen it on in decent quality with, you know, film projectors.
That has nothing to do with audio. Has nothing to do with audio. Chocolate swears that Darth Vader said, "Luke, I am your father," and I know he said, "No, I am your father." How do you explain that?
Bad memory.
I can, yeah.
Well, bad memory and adverts and various other things that will also have misinterpreted a certain piece of dialogue, and then they parrot it off incorrectly. So people will find references to things that they thought were said in movies, and there's a commonplace misconception that is repeated amongst the people who aren't the movie. And therefore it becomes the commonplace misconception of what was said in the movie, i.e., Luke, I am your father, as opposed to, no, I am your father. Well, that piece of dialogue hasn't changed, but people's memory and perception of it has been skewed by other repetitions that were incorrect.
Also, there's the way that your memory works and how a memory is introduced to you. Because if the introduction of the information is close to how the memory actually was, then your mind will just adapt to that. You know, so when someone introduced that Mandela effect as, Luke, I am your father, it was close enough that the way you remembered it changed.
Indeed.
It's not just the memory.
well,
It's
I
not
think
just
with
the
the-
memory. I have a friend who has one of the toys from back then, and it literally says, "Luke, I am your father."
Perfect
Yeah, but
example.
that's not what the movie said.
Yeah,
Chocolate.
exactly. So a toy manufacturer produces a toy, and they go, what did he say again? The key detail is that Luke's father is, what's his bloody name? Darth Vader.
Darth Vader.
Right.
Anakin Skywalker.
That's the Anakin Skywalker, correct. Well, once you find out that plot point, if you remember it incorrectly as Luke, I am your father, and you put it in a doll, and somebody hears that doll saying it over and over and over again, they will parrot that out as though it is the quote. Well, that makes it correct, but not correct. It's not what was said in the film. It was what was said by the doll. So the doll did definitely say that, and you can prove it. Well, that's how your memory got skewed. Meanwhile, there's other visual representations in Star Wars, like the silver leg. Well, one of the things I used to flog to people with high definition not around was line doublers and scalers to work on projectors and projection TVs to get a massive image out of a laserdisc. Really good quality pictures considering the time. And people would notice details like the silver leg. Because when you watch it on a crappy VHS on your little CRT TV, you don't notice such details when it's contrasted against sand. You've got to have really good detail and really good picture quality to actually notice a detail like that. Something that I would sell to people. I know that they wouldn't see that detail when they had a home VCR and I was flogging Laserdiscs. So you just show them. You take them into a dark room that's been perfectly calibrated, not by me, I'm colourblind, by someone else in the store. And they'd walk in and they'd go, oh my God, I never noticed blah, 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 blah. And then they'd give you their money. That was the idea. You can only show somebody, you can only get somebody to part with money for TV and audio equipment if they hear or see something they didn't hear or see before. But then when suddenly the quality improves by virtue of time, you get DVDs, then you get HD versions of it on Blu-ray, then you get 4K versions of it on HD Blu-ray. As these qualities become more mainstream for more people to see, they go back to their old movies, look at it in HD and go, oh wow, I never noticed that. And you go, yeah, you didn't, because you couldn't. It wasn't good enough to notice it.
Well, I know for a fact, because that movie, my son, when he was born, loved it, and used to put him in the high chair and watching. And that particular part, I used to recite word for word. I even dressed up as Darth Vader on his first birthday party. And I got the videos. But Chocolate swears. He said, Luke, I am your father.
Neil, can't you see Chocolate's just toying with you?
Well, think about the logic of saying, Luke, I am your father in the doll, because you're trying to portray a plot point in one audio message. To say, no, I am your father would be confusing for a doll to say. So it's reasonable that they would change it to, Luke, I am your father.
Yeah, but they use that to say that makes no sense. Why would he say, no, I am your father? He would say, Luke, I am your father.
Because it's part of a dialogue. It's two people talking to each other, and Luke's talking to him about how his father was, and he suggests that he'd killed him. It's like, no, I am your father.
Correct. Correct, Nathan.
Yeah, if you put Luke, I am your father in that dialogue, it makes no sense.
No sense at all. You listening, Chocolate?
If it had no Luke, I am your father, it would make sense. Because in that dialogue, but why, when you've been having a battle with somebody, would you suddenly start getting on friendly first name terms with them? You know, it could be the case that they re-emphasise that point because it is a father-son relationship, but it very much isn't a father and son relationship, hence the plot point makes sense. So he wouldn't necessarily start referring to him as, no, Luke, my son, I am your father. It's not doing that.
The confusion starts with, what's his name, that played the voice of Darth Vader? Forgot his name, James Earl Jones. Yeah, in an interview, he was reading it, and he was saying, no, he's lying. And in that, he said, Luke, I am your father.
He also read that off for the doll as well. That he read the wrong script off for that. So I'm sure he's repeated Luke, I am your father incorrectly several times just for, you know, toy manufacturers and other things.
How do you know he didn't say, look, I am your father, and Luke, I am your father? We can make this really go.
Because he says, no, I am your father.
Look, I am your father.
He doesn't say look or Luke. He says no.
Well, if you can't look for it, how would you know?
There was no look to Luke for.
He weren't a Geordie, was he?
Luke.
Well, isn't...
Aye.
Luke.
Did you Luke?
Luke
Yeah.
over there.
Hey, back to the point, though. Isn't the Mandela effect sort of some people's end way around objective facts? So they can say that, oh, that's not objectively true. It's been changed.
The road to delusion.
Yes.
Yeah.
The only one that's...
Oh, here we go.
Is the Mandela effect itself. Because that's the only one I remember. When he came out officially as dead, I remember thinking he'd already died. And moved on, and then Mandela effect comes up. But genuinely, that's the only one I do think is...
Really?
I remember it being announced.
Wow. Well, maybe there was a newspaper article or something that got it wrong in the UK, but I'd seen certain evidence presented to me back in the day. This is 6 years ago when I first looked into it, of exactly that, where there was false reports, but in the States as opposed to here, because here we had free Mandela T-shirts and the free Mandela song, and I was in no way under any misapprehension. But there we go.
Yeah, but there's something like the Berenstein Bears and certain things that are like cereal boxes.
Bloody Neil.
Like,
With that, I'm going to say a huge, massive, enormous thank you, both Discord and G Plus panels. If you are watching this on either Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley Premiering stream, stay tuned as there will be an after show to follow. I've been Nathan Oakley and I will see you all in the next video.
what a lovely day!